Welcome to the July 2012 episode of Virtual Space TV 3D with host Amanda Bush and space weatherman James C. Birk. Here is Amanda. Today we will present stories about the upcoming wild ride of the Mars Science Lab, the latest developments with Virgin Galactic's SpaceShipTwo rocket vehicle, and a powerful new engine from SpaceX. James Birk will also give us an update on space weather. Mars Science Lab, or Curiosity as it is now called, is the most advanced rover that NASA has ever launched to explore the surface of another heavenly body. It is also the largest. The previous Mars rovers were surrounded by airbags to protect them when they hit the surface, but Curiosity was judged too big and heavy for airbags. So NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab developed an elaborate sequence of actions that must occur from the time the system first enters the atmosphere at 22,000 kilometers per hour until it is lowered gently onto the surface via a crane. You heard correctly. Curiosity will be lowered to the surface by tethers hanging from a vehicle hovering above it on rocket thrust. As this animation shows, Curiosity initially enters the atmosphere while still inside a protective shell and a heat shield. After the atmosphere reduces its speed sufficiently, a parachute opens to slow the descent stage further. Then the heat shield is discarded. The parachute and shell are detached at about 1.6 kilometers above the ground and the system descends under rocket power till it is 7.5 meters above the surface. Then the top section of the system, called the sky crane, begins to lower the rover with tethers while hovering with its rockets. When the rover touches the ground, the sky crane senses that the tethers are limp and cuts them before flying far enough away to avoid crashing on top of the rover. About 7 minutes will pass from the time the spacecraft first hits the top of the atmosphere till Curiosity is on the surface. A lot of people, especially at JPL and NASA, will be holding their breath while waiting for Curiosity to send back a signal saying that it has arrived on the surface in one piece. A great cheer will go up at the JPL control room and the nuclear-powered rover will then begin a multi-year investigation of the chemistry, geology and history of Mars using its many sophisticated instruments. If no such signal is received, however, there will be many who will question the wisdom of spending $2.5 billion on a project that had to start off with such a complex, first-of-a-kind entrance onto the Mars stage. Virgin Galactic hopes to begin flying ticket holders to space on the SpaceShipTwo suborbital rocket ships sometime in 2013. Such a space tourist flight begins with the SpaceShipTwo carried to about 15 kilometers by the White Knight II aircraft and dropped. The SpaceShipTwo's hybrid rocket motor fires and the vehicle is accelerated vertically to 3 times the speed of sound before the motor shuts off. The vehicle coasts up above the official 100-kilometer border of space. After about 5 minutes of weightlessness, the passengers must get into their seats for the ride back down through the atmosphere. During the fall, the wings of the SpaceShipTwo fold up in a way that keeps the vehicle oriented downward like a shuttlecock in badminton. This is called feathering. After slowing sufficiently, the wings fold back out and the SS-2 can glide unpowered back to the spaceport runway where it started. The SpaceShipTwo development has taken several years longer than predicted by Richard Branson when he hired Burt Rutan and his scaled composites company just after they won the X Prize in 2004 with the Spaceship One. The White Knight II first flew in December of 2008 and the SpaceShipTwo was taken up and dropped for its first glide flight in October of 2010. So far, the SpaceShipTwo has not flown under rocket power. Only glide landings have been tested. Last fall the SpaceShipTwo had an unexpected stall just after the release from the White Knight 2, and the pilot actually used feathering to regain control of the vehicle and land it safely. On June 26, the SpaceShipTwo flew for the first time since this stall episode. Some structural changes were made to fix the stall. A couple of days later the SpaceShipTwo was dropped again. In parallel, it was announced that the rocket motor 2 had been test-fired twice as well. Richard Branson says the plan is to have the first rocket-powered test flights by the end of this year. They will gradually fire the motor for longer periods until the SpaceShipTwo reaches space. After some number of test flights to space, the first paid passenger flights will occur perhaps by late 2013. Richard Branson will fly to space along with his family just before the start of commercial flights. SpaceX is not resting on its laurels from the successful Dragon mission to the International Space Station in May. The company has another flight to the ISS planned for this year, and it also has several hardware projects underway. This includes development of a new engine called the Merlin 1D, which has 60% higher thrust than the Merlin 1C used on the May launch of the Falcon 9. It also has one of the highest thrust-to-weight ratios of any engine in history. The company just released a video showing the engine firing at full power for the full 185-second duration needed for the Falcon 9 first stage. The engine also has fewer parts to make assembly easier. SpaceX must make hundreds of engines per year to meet its manifest of commercial and government launches. An improved version of the Falcon, called Falcon 9 version 1.1, will include 9 of the Merlin 1D engines on the first stage and 1 on the second stage. The stages are also extended to provide more propellant. This version will become the standard vehicle after the 5th Falcon launch. The greater performance is needed to launch several large communications satellites for commercial customers. Now let us see what Jim has to report about the latest space weather. Jim?
Thanks, Amanda. It has been clear for some time that the current solar cycle would have a peak number of sunspots much below those of the past 100 years. Recently the daily average has been in the 40 to 50 range compared to around 120 in the previous solar cycle peak in 2001. In mid-June, there were actually some days when the face of the sun was nearly empty of spots. There will be lots of interest in the coming months to see if the average number begins to fall from this already low number. Even in this reduced state of activity, the sun can still put on a brilliant show. On July 6, a huge solar flare was spotted. The outburst is spectacular in these videos from NASA's orbiting SOHO and SDO observatories. Looking closer to home, astronauts on the International Space Station recently took images of noctilucent, or night shining, clouds. These are transient, upper atmospheric phenomena that are still not fully understood. They float between 80 and 100 kilometers, right at the official border to space. The wispy filaments of ice crystals are generally only seen in the upper latitudes of the northern and southern hemispheres. Ice crystals need grains of dust on which to form, and it is not known how the dust reaches such high altitudes. It's speculated that the dust could be from micrometeoroids, but this is not yet proven. Now back to you, Amanda.
Thank you, James. That ends our show for today. Please come back next month for another episode of Virtual Space TV 3D, which is produced by Binary Space with content from hobbyspace.com. Goodbye, and may all your space travels go well.